He's on a mission to improve city living using technology. Please welcome the former Deputy Mayor of New York and the CEO of Google-backed Sidewalk Labs, Dan Doctoroff.
Good morning. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. I thought maybe I'd start off by telling you something a little bit about me. As you just heard, I recently left about a year ago as CEO of Bloomberg LP, which I'd done as basically a steward for Mike Bloomberg. When he came out of office, decided that he was a little bored and wanted to get more involved, I decided, you know what, there probably wasn't enough room for me with God in the building. And so I had to figure out what I wanted to do. Now, I've had 3 different careers. The first career is that I have been a private equity investor. I led a large private equity firm. If you could move those slides way back to the very beginning. And then I became deputy mayor of New York. Then Mike turned around one day in his chair and said, what do you think about running Bloomberg LP? So the 3 things that I have done is build companies through acquisition and investment. Second, I have led a city. And third, led a technology-enabled data and information company. So what I decided I wanted to do as my next career is actually do something that combines all 3 of those things in one. To create a company that sits at the intersection of technology and cities. And do it at a moment that I think is actually a historic moment. A moment when we are really entering the 4th technological revolution as it will affect cities. In fact, the modern city is now at the point where we have the opportunity to literally rethink the city from the ground up. And the reason for that is because digital technology is ready, finally ready to transform cities. As I said, this is the 4th urban technology revolution in the last 200 years. The modern city as we know it has been formed by the 3 previous ones. First was the steam engine. The steam engine made it possible for people to get to cities more easily. It made it easier to create the factories and industrial capacity that powered the cities through the 1800s and into the early 1900s. Then in the late 1800s, you had the imposition of the electric grid. That made it easier to get around inside cities with subways and with streetcars. It made it possible to go vertical, made the elevator possible. And finally, actually, made it possible to turn on the lights at night, making cities 24 hours. The 3rd revolution, which occurred in the first part of the last century, the 3rd revolution was the automobile. The automobile forced us to rethink public space. It forced us to separate the uses on the streets in a way they hadn't been before, which is why today roughly 30% of a city's land use is parking or separated roadways. The automobile also made it easier to flee the city, which almost killed our center cities. We are now on the verge of a 4th technological revolution in cities. Call it what you will, call it the digital networked revolution, and it is just about to impact virtually every part of the cities that we know and love. So there are essentially 6 or so technological foundations of this revolution. You know them all, but it's the combinations of them that are going to produce the kind of revolutionary change equivalent to the steam engine, the electric grid and the automobiles. The first is connectivity. I heard you just had a little poll. How many people have a smartphone? Where we are now at the point where virtually everybody in a city, everybody almost in society can have these supercomputers in their pockets, all connected by increasingly high-speed fiber. Complete revolution when everybody can actually do that. Second, reputation. When you go into an Uber and you rate a driver and a driver rates you, that is a profound change. Because now we can have trusted relationships with people we don't know. In a small town, everybody knows each other. In reality now, we have the capacity or will to know people whether we've ever met them or not. And that applies to places as well. Third is location. Every time you get asked on your phone, are you willing to let them use your locational services, and you say yes, you're giving permission to somebody to track where you are. Increasingly, we are going to know where you are, where everybody is, not just down to a few meters, but down to centimeters or millimeters, knowing where everybody is at all times. And it's happening. Fourth is sensing. By 2020, there will be 20 billion sensors in things, measuring everything. And what that means is we're now able to measure in real time how things are actually performing, to be able to anticipate problems rather than simply respond to them. All of this is being enabled by enormous computing power, and maybe even more importantly, the capacity to analyze all of the data that is being produced in ways that ordinary people can actually understand. And finally, uniquely, as it affects cities themselves, there is a whole set of new technologies which you know about. Robotics, 3D printing, all of which rely on those other foundational elements that are fundamentally going to change the way we design and build things. 6 foundational technologies in combination producing a revolution. It's what we call combinatorial innovation. Take Uber or Airbnb. They're not the product of just one technology. They are the product, in the case of Airbnb, as you can see, 3 technologies, or in the case of Uber, 4 separate technologies. Combinatorial innovation. But we have to understand something. And this is really where Sidewalk Labs, my new company, comes in. Sidewalk Labs is a partnership between Google and me. Our whole mission is to find ways to leverage technology to solve big urban problems. It's that combination of technology and understanding how urban environments function that ultimately are going to enable us, hopefully, to avoid the negative consequences of one of those technology revolutions. So, we cannot assume that technology is inevitably good for the city. Think about the steam engine. Yes, it brought people and goods to cities. Look here on the right, it also produced massive environmental problems. Electricity. Electricity changed our lives in many ways, many wonderful ways, but it also enabled us to amass people in high-rise slums. The automobile, we all know. Here on the left, you see the Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. On the right, Los Angeles at rush hour. massive congestion. So the question is, how do we harness the power of technology to actually make our cities great? And in order to do that, you have to have a set of beliefs about what cities are and what you want to do. So at Sidewalk Labs, we've developed a set of principles about cities. Most importantly, cities are about people. Technology is only valuable to the extent that it helps the lives of people, that it improves quality of life. When we employ technology and forget about people, we degrade quality of life. Cities are valuable because they bring people together and foster interactions. To the extent technology can do that, it will be a positive. Cities, more than any other places, and this is why, as you hear all the time, more than 50% of the world's population for the first time live in cities. They are engines of opportunity. Cities are shared. The reason cities can be more efficient is because we find ways, for example, with bike share on the right, to share assets, to share experiences, to share infrastructure, to share responsibility and reward. And what we see is that the technologies that I've described are dramatically enhancing the capacity for sharing. Cities adapt over time. There is no such thing as a fixed city. In New York, when Mike Bloomberg and I were running the city, we believed that cities could go in one of two directions. They can go down like New York did in the 1970s and face a horrible cycle of disinvestment, or they can go up. The only way you continue to make progress in a city is by adapting. Here you see on the left, or you did, a picture of the High Line before it was renovated, and now a picture of the High Line today as a park that is central to an entire new district. And finally, almost finally, cities thrive on diversity. The greatest cities in the world are also the most diverse. And then lastly, cities are anchored by shared values. It's very important to note that even in this world of technology where we have so much information, it is never about control. It is about coordination. It's about enabling the private market. It is about enabling people to fulfill their potential while at the same time making sure that there is coordination. So what does this enlightened digital city look like? In many ways, it'll feel completely familiar, but in many ways, it will be very different. Let's take an example. Autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are coming. They are coming. So what does that actually mean when we start to, over the course of the next 10 and 20 years or so, see the mass adoption of autonomous vehicles? Let me take you through just a very quick scenario of how the city actually changes. Well, first of all, we don't need nearly as much land for parking and roadways as we did before. What happens when that occurs? Well, we can use it for open space. We can increase density. Let's assume for the moment that we use it for more open space. Our block structures begin to change. Even our building forms begin to change. Think about the buildings themselves and the way we zone in cities. We zone because we want to keep uses away from each other, but what if now with all the data to monitor what's going on, we can zone for performance rather than for use? We can know how much noise, and as long as you stay under that limit, you're fine. At Sidewalk Labs, I just want to give you one example of the kind of thing that we are doing to advance that enlightened city. Said, our goal is to solve big problems. What's a big problem in cities? Digital inequality. 3 million people in New York City alone don't have access to broadband. Here's what we're doing about it. Link NYC. Just 2 weeks ago, you started to see these new kiosks go up on the streets. They will be in 7,500 locations across New York City, offering free Wi-Fi, access to public information, access to 311, 911, free video calling, voice calling. Most importantly, though, super fast 1 gigabit Wi-Fi throughout New York City, enabling people to dramatically reduce their data plans or have access in a way that they never have before. These things are also going to have sensors and cameras and produce massive amounts of data on a very micro-geographic level that can enable owners of buildings, the city, or other users of the city to understand the conditions of the city so that we have an opportunity not only to analyze it, but to actually do something about it. All of this, by the way, is being done in a unique public-private partnership with the City of New York that will generate for the city hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but also is backed by a viable commercial model. This relies on most all of those different technologies. Imagine the potential of a completely wired city when everybody's connected. That's what the future of digital technology is all about. Thank you very much.